Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are ripping back the velvet curtain, taking a stack of source material and really dismantling a legend.
We are.
Because when you hear the name Frank Sinatra, you instantly think of the confident icon, right? The tuxedo, the swagger, the untouchable charisma.
That's the myth. That's the myth we've all inherited. But if you really dig into the biographical accounts, the portrait that emerges is, well, it's far more complex.
Complex is putting it mildly.
It's the story of a profoundly scarred, deeply insecure young man whose entire tumultuous journey, his stratospheric ascent, his near-total collapse, and that phoenix-like comeback was driven by a psychological engine rooted firmly in early trauma in Hoboken.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are skipping the glamour of the Rat Pack for now and going straight to the emotional crucible that forged the voice.
Right to the beginning.
We're unpacking the intimate, often disturbing details of Sinatra's complex origins, the conflicting, almost violent family dynamics, this political machine his mother ran, the professional nadir in the early 50s, and the desperate, career-saving gamble that led to his monumental triumph in From Here to Eternity.
And the sources are incredibly comprehensive. They take us beyond that public image to the private terrors, detailing not just what he did, but really why he did it.
Exactly.
You see a performer who became a giant because he was constantly, and I mean constantly, terrified of returning to the damaged, distorted state of his youth.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately. And we have to start not with his voice, but with his physical scars. We had to go back to a cold December Sunday afternoon in 1915 in Hoboken's Little Italy.
A neighborhood people at the time often dismissively called Guinea Town.
Right. And this is where it all begins.
This was a pivotal, almost traumatic entry into the world. Frank's mother, Dolly, was just 19 years old, and the labor stalled dangerously.
Just 19.
The sources describe the attending physician being summoned and performing a delivery using the dreaded obstetric forceps. Now, you have to imagine this instrument. This was pre-modern, a heavy, cold, almost medieval-looking tool.
And the immediate physical outcome was catastrophic for the infant.
It was. The force of the delivery tore the left side of the child's face and neck. It was a severe tear that needed immediate stitching. A life-saving measure, sure, but one that left a permanent, visible scar. It also badly damaged his left ear and perforated the eardrum.
The physical damage is one thing, but the psychological scar, that's the real story here.
That's the lasting emotional impact, yes. It's what shapes his entire narrative. This wasn't just a tough birth, it was a formative wound.
And he never forgot it.
Never. Sinatra himself reflected on it bitterly later in life. He told his daughter, Nancy, something to the effect of, "They weren't thinking about me, they were just thinking about my mother. They just kind of ripped me out and tossed me aside."
I found that quote absolutely chilling. Ripped out and tossed me aside.
It's brutal.
That feeling of being damaged, of being flawed from the very first moment of existence, it just becomes this relentless, churning engine demanding validation. Everything that came next, the perfectionism, the anger, the obsessive need for approval, you have to filter it through that initial trauma.
Absolutely. And the scars didn't stop there. He was highly self-conscious, and for good reason. In childhood, he suffered another surgical trauma. A mastoid operation.
What did that leave him with?
It left him with a thick ridge of scar tissue running down his neck, right near the already damaged ear. So now you have two very visible marks on one side of his head.
And then adolescence hits.
And then came adolescence, where severe cystic acne ravaged his skin.
And this wasn't just, typical teenage acne. The sources suggest it was profound, compounding his already heightened self-consciousness over the birth disfigurement and the mastoid scar.
It absolutely was, and it established a lifelong obsession with physical appearance and cleanliness that went way beyond mere vanity.
No.
Well, the sources note that even at the height of his fame, when he was the global icon of Tool, he still applied Max Factor pancake makeup religiously, every single morning, to his face and his neck to cover those scars.
Every day.
Every single day. Furthermore, he took several showers a day, a behavioral pattern that suggests a profound, deep-seated obsession with cleansing himself, maybe psychologically, from these perceived flaws.
The shame of it all just manifested as this raw, unpredictable rage.
Yes. There is a definitive incident the sources recount from when he was just 11. Playmates, in that cruel way children have, began taunting him, calling him Scarface.
And he just snapped.
It triggered a volcanic reaction. He didn't just fight the kids, he tracked down the physician who delivered him, determined to seek retribution, to give the good doctor a good beating.
Wow.
Luckily for the doctor, he wasn't home, or history might have taken a very dark turn.
What's so significant about that anecdote is the direction of the rage. It wasn't just, surface anger at the kids. It was aimed directly at the perceived source of his damage. That kind of raw, focused volatility, that refusal to accept weakness, that became the defining characteristic of his personal dealings and his later professional feuds.
Which brings us directly to the Sinatra family paradox. This is where he learned both his power and his deep, paralyzing fear of it.
Let's talk about his parents, Dolly and Marty.
You have these contrasting elements, Dolly, whose background was Northern Italian, and Marty, a Sicilian immigrant. And the sources stress this ancient, deeply held social prejudice that North Italians often held toward the Southerners, even within their own family.
And Dolly was, by all accounts, the dominant force.
Oh, without a doubt. She was tiny, under 5 feet, maybe 90 pounds, but possessed this absolutely relentless, almost Napoleonic drive. She was politically engaged, actively running her local democratic machine.
So she had real power in the community.
Real power. And she often dictated the lives of the powerless males around her, including her husband and her son. Her ambition was the reason the family eventually escaped Guineatown after 14 years crammed into that small apartment at 415 Monroe Street.
And Marty, his father, what was he like?
Marty, in contrast, was softer, maybe more romantic. He was a former prizefighter, and he famously wooed Dolly by serenading her. But, and this is a crucial detail, he was illiterate.
Illiterate. So Dolly's drive to elevate the family financially and socially, it all fell on her shoulders.
Entirely. And you can see it in the efforts she went to secure him a prestigious job.
That job was in the Hoboken Fire Department. Now, you have to remember, in 1930s Hoboken, that was a highly coveted position. It was stable, well-paying, and not excessively laborious.
And crucially, the HFD was predominantly Irish. To get that job, you needed to pass a written test,
Which Marty couldn't do.
Since Marty was neither Irish nor capable of reading the test, Dolly had to leverage her political capital. She used her collection of Democratic Party chits, amassed through years of activism in the Third Ward, and she simply bulldozed the system.
She just forced it through.
She navigated the corrupt local machine, made the right payoffs, called in the right favors, and guaranteed him that position. This political victory solidified the family's middle-class status and allowed them to move. But it also taught Frank a profound lesson.
What was that?
That power comes through leverage, through ruthlessness, and through the strategic use of influence.
But Dolly's attention was a terrifying paradox for Frank. On one hand, you have the coddling.
Right. She had wanted a girl, so she dressed him in pink baby clothes and later in those beautiful, almost effeminate little Lord Fauntleroy outfits. He was spoiled with nice clothes his entire youth.
And on the other hand?
And then there was the harsh physical discipline. The sources describe moments of terrifying instability. She once pushed Frank down a flight of stairs, knocking him unconscious.
My God.
She would take him swimming, only to terrifyingly duck his head under ocean waves, holding him there for a moment. It's ironic, perhaps, that he became an expert swimmer later, conquering that fear. But the memory of that terror must have remained.
And she had a weapon of choice, didn't she?
She did. Most frequently, she governed through physical threat. She kept a specific stick, a small bat, described as something like a policeman's nightstick, behind the bar at Marty O'Brien's, the tavern she ran, and she did not hesitate to use it.
So what did Frank himself say about this?
He later confessed to Shirley MacLaine that Dolly scared the shit out of me, never knew what she'd hate that I'd do.
And that's the key psychological insight right there.
It is. Frank grew up with a hyper-awareness of an unpredictable, powerful maternal figure who both provided him with this sense of entitlement and instilled a paralyzing fear of disappointing her. That duality, the arrogance and the deep anxiety, is what fueled his ambition.
He was trying to escape Dolly, but he was also completely formed by her. He inherited that volatile, ruthless temperament.
Which is why he turned so fiercely toward musical escape.
An escape that actually had roots in the family.
Yes, both his parents sang. But the true transformative influence was Bing Crosby. Sinatra felt that Crosby was different. He removed the remove of the traditional formal singers. Bing seemed like the most common of men, speaking directly to the listener.
Crosby was the template of cool warmth.
He was. And Sinatra recognized that he could emulate Bing's directness and natural phrasing, but he could infuse it with his own raw, unabashed heat. It wasn't just emulation, it was rivalry. He knew in his gut that he was destined to knock over Crosby.
This ambition wasn't just a cheap fantasy, though. It manifested in a major financial decision for a teenager, especially during the depths of the Depression.
A huge one.
Yeah.
Sinatra purchased his first sound system, the sources detail it, a microphone, an amplifier with those slowly glowing vacuum tubes, and a speaker covered with sparkly fabric.
That was a massive investment. The sources estimate the price at $65 in 1934. To put that in perspective for you, that's the equivalent of well over $1,000 today.
It was a decent couple of weeks' wages if you were lucky enough to have a job at all.
So this investment shows his absolute, almost delusional commitment to performance.
And that equipment is a physical representation of his psychological journey. It was early, showy, designed to grab attention. Compare that to his later decades of performing, where he insisted on using small, unobtrusive black microphones.
Right, mics that were meant to foster the illusion of intimacy, of Frank speaking only to you, the individual listener.
He moved from needing to be seen, the showy equipment, to needing to be heard through unobtrusive craft.
But while he's pursuing this dream, Dolly is still trying to direct his life. She's still trying to leverage her power for him.
Of course. When he dropped out of school, having initially wanted him to be a doctor or an engineer, she secured him a job bundling newspapers at the Jersey Observer.
And who did she get to help with that?
She used her political contacts, specifically his godfather, Frank Garrick.
And this is where his inherent, deeply rooted instability collides with his mother's expectations.
Big time. Sinatra lost the job. The sources indicate he falsely claimed that Garrick had secured it for him, which led to a breakdown of trust with his employer. When he was fired, he exploded.
A tantrum.
A tantrum built not just on a ferocious sense of entitlement, but also on the deep fear of his mother and how she might feel about his losing his job.
That fear of Dolly triggered a nuclear chain reaction of projected rage.
It did. He was furious at himself for failing, furious at the employer for catching him, and then, astonishingly, furious at Garrick for having secured the job in the first place, somehow making Garrick responsible for Frank's own inability to keep the position.
The really astonishing part is how long he held that grudge.
It's almost unbelievable. Sinatra, out of pure, festering self-justification, cut his godfather out of his life.
Oh, wow.
He didn't speak to Frank Garrick for nearly 50 years.
50 years?
He failed to invite him to his wedding or any of his children's baptisms. It's an incredible demonstration of holding a grudge as a defensive mechanism against personal accountability.
It demonstrates that his ambition wasn't just artistic, it was existential. The alternative, returning home as the unemployed failure, the scar-faced ne'er-do-well, was simply intolerable to him.
Which is why his brief forays into legitimate physical labor were such agonizing failures.
Tell us about those.
He tried catching hot rivets at a shipyard for 3 miserable days. He had a deep fear of heights, making that work unbearable.
So that was out.
Then he took a job doing dock work, cleaning condenser units, a tedious suffusion task of constantly removing debris only to have it wash right back in.
He simply didn't have the patience, the resilience, or the mental fortitude for the ordinary grind.
Not at all. The sources imply that as he performed this backbreaking, anonymous labor, he must have been gazing across the river at the Art Deco towers of Manhattan, hearing Bing Crosby's voice in his head.
Believing that fame wasn't just a wish.
It was his justice. It was the only way to validate the damaged child who had been tossed aside.
So his anxiety was his primary motivator. He was desperate.
Completely. He continued working low-end gigs, refining his voice, using his sparkly equipment, and learning to mimic Crosby while inserting his own personality.
This desperation eventually put him on a bigger stage with the Hoboken Four, a local amateur group.
Right. They had originally named themselves the Four Flashes.
Which they wisely changed.
Very wisely, realizing they risked sounding like hot flashes, or even worse, four fleshers, which, is slang for a cheat. They ended up winning on Major Bowe's original amateur hour.
But even this triumph came with a moment of crushing humiliation.
It did. On stage, Major Bowes asked them routine questions about their civilian employment. Sinatra was already suffering from the roar of blood in his ears, from stage fright, but then a bandmate, Fred Tamburo, blurted out about Frank, he never worked a day in his life.
Ouch. The public confirmation of his dropout status, of his failure in the working world.
Another piece of fuel thrown onto the fire of his ambition. It just cemented his drive. But the bandmates also saw the genius. They realized he really should be the one in front because Frank was the one who genuinely felt what he sang.
And that ability to inhabit a lyric was honed through incredible technical dedication.
Yes, he began taking formal lessons, paying a modest $2 for 45 minutes, focusing heavily on diaphragm control. He had the essential realization, you can't sing it if you don't understand it.
So it wasn't just about the sound, it was about the meaning.
Exactly. His voice was initially thin and high, but he actively worked to shift it down into his chest, giving it the necessary warmth and resonance.
His poise and diction improved immensely, bringing the words to life.
Though the sources do remind us that he retained that strong Hoboken accent for years, where the R's were dicey and the T's were often dentalized into a chi sound, making a word like trade sound like crade.
And that journey took him to the big time. First, Harry James's band.
For $75 a week, which was a good salary. But the major artistic move was to Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. Dorsey was a meticulous band leader and became an almost father-like figure to the emotionally needy Sinatra.
The schedule Dorsey kept was intense and brutal, but it was perfect for forging his craft.
Oh, it was relentless. 6 shows a day, plus nightly rehearsals starting at 9 p.m., followed by grueling recording sessions. This was the environment where he perfected his signature breath control.
The Dorsey effect.
Yes, it's legendary. Dorsey, being a trombonist, was a master of sustaining long, seamless phrases. Sinatra studied how Dorsey used his lungs. He would literally swim underwater while practicing holding his breath, learning how to sing long, silken measure after measure without any apparent pause.
Creating that smooth, continuous line that became his trademark.
And this intense artistic growth also involved a profound shift in performance convention. Previously, band vocalists like Jack Leonard were generally confined to singing just one chorus in the middle of a song.
Right.
Dorsey allowed Sinatra to vocalize the entire song.
Which gave the listener a completely new experience. Sinatra was essentially turning the vocalist from an ancillary feature into the central emotional narrator of the piece.
His early recording of All or Nothing at All really demonstrates this transformation. It shows the sheer emotional and technical power he was beginning to wield.
But the personal cost was immediate and stark.
It was. During his rigorous touring schedule with Dorsey, he missed the births of both his children, Nancy Jr. and Frank Jr.
And he was quite cold about it later, wasn't he?
Strangely cold. He recalled missing baby Nancy's birth by saying, "It was just a taste of things to come, man. When I think of all the family affairs and events I would miss over the years because I was on the road."
He was completely focused on realizing his destiny, and family was secondary to that quest for validation.
Completely. The sources mark the Roseland Ballroom gig as a pivotal moment, where Metronome's critic called him a shy boy, yet the girls immediately abandoned the bandstand and crowded the microphone.
They sensed that unique blend of vulnerability and romantic aggression.
The audience recognized that voice communicated romantic yearning with hints of lust behind it, which was something new. It was arrogance with a quaver of vulnerability.
It spoke directly to the teenage girl's desire for an exciting, slightly dangerous boyfriend who needed her nurturing.
The phenomenon peaked at his Paramount Theater debut. The sources described the scene as pure dynamite. The auditorium wasn't just excited, it was vibrating with ear-splitting screams and the overwhelming heat and musk of female lust.
And here's where the specific, visceral details become important. George Evans, his soon-to-be pivotal publicist, noted something disturbing.
He noted the fact that he could smell the faint, acrid tang of urine because girls, utterly hysterical and refusing to miss a moment, would not relinquish their seats for hours. They stayed through multiple shows.
Some observers called it a great herd of female beasts, all in heat at once.
That kind of hysteria requires an immediate damage control strategy. That iconic moment, a girl tosses a single rose, he catches it, and dramatically sniffs it, confirmed his unique appeal. But Evans recognized that this level of public frenzy, coupled with Frank's private recklessness, needed managing.
Evans instantly decided to take the game still further, recognizing that he wasn't selling just music, he was selling emotional drama.
And his core strategy was brilliant for the conservative 1940s, manufacturing the image of Sinatra as a devoted, wholesome family man.
All to mitigate the impending scandal from his aggressive and relentless womanizing.
Evans was a master of manufactured hype. He leveraged sheer volume and calculated absurdity, creating and publicizing countless fan clubs. We're talking about the Sighing Society of Sinatra Swooners, the Slaves of Sinatra.
My personal favorite, the Frank Sinatra Fan and Mahjong Club.
Which was almost certainly fictitious. But he stoked the hysteria, managing to get teenage girls pushing, shoving, and even running under police horses in Times Square.
But the domestic reality was pure strain on his first wife, Big Nancy.
Oh, a nightmare. While Evans promoted the happy family, Nancy was dealing with the reality. Girls tiptoeing up the driveway, hiding behind bushes, writing love notes on the garage door.
Or simply pressing their noses against the glass of their Hasbrook Heights house, which Frank had, ironically christened Warm Valley.
And Nancy, the good wife, tried to maintain her composure. She famously attempted to cope by sending out donuts and drinks to the persistent fans.
But the pressure on her was immense, and Evans recognized that Nancy herself needed a PR makeover to maintain the illusion.
He did. He saw her as a dignified, good woman, but he feared she was on the verge of becoming one of those Italian peasant ladies you saw sitting on apartment stoops heavy, fiercely plain.
So he had to polish her image.
Encouraging dignity and outward appearance, knowing that the public model of success required a stable domestic partner, regardless of Frank's private chaos.
Meanwhile, artistically, Sinatra was consolidating his power. In 1946, he collaborated with arranger Axel Stordahl on the voice of Frank Sinatra.
A crucial moment. This wasn't just a collection of songs. The sources confirm it was the first thematic popular music album ever available to the public.
It was a conscious shift from selling hit singles to selling an artistic mood or concept. He was signaling his final transition from the energetic boy Frankie to the assured artist Frank.
He had absorbed and now shed the influence of Bing Crosby and was fully coming into his own mastery.
But this immense confidence was built on a foundation that was constantly shaking. We have to address the complex paradoxes that fame couldn't erase. Vulnerability, recklessness, and perceived betrayal of country.
Let's start with the draft situation. World War II was raging, and here was one of the biggest stars in America, yet he was classified 4F, unfit for service.
And why was that?
This was due to his perforated eardrum, a result of his birth and earlier issues, chronic mastoiditis, and surprisingly, being underweight at a frail 119 pounds.
This immediately painted a target on his back.
Oh, relentlessly. The draft dodger epithet stuck, particularly because it came from returning servicemen who felt he had gotten a pass while they were sacrificing everything overseas.
They resented his soaring fame, his expensive clothes, his constant pursuit of women.
Deeply. And that public resentment coincided exactly with the definitive fracture of his first marriage.
The constant absence, the constant affairs, the public knowledge of his indiscretions. Nancy Barbados Sinatra endured immense suffering.
She was often crying quietly, and Frank was so absent that he relied on his associate, Hank Sinatra, to deliver excuses about Frank being dead tired to avoid facing his wife.
Frank's response to missing crucial life events was often cold-blooded.
He rationalized it. He hated missing them, he said, but the road and his career were paramount.
The press picked up on the signs when he was photographed with other women.
The sources note a bizarre attempt at damage control. In a picture with Lana Turner, he was clearly wearing his wedding band, but he wore it on the wrong finger for the world to see. A small public gesture that highlighted his complete lack of real commitment.
The ultimate collision of his personal and professional turbulence arrived in the form of Ava Gardner.
His grand passion, the woman who finally proved he had met his match in volatility, fire, and raw physical beauty. Their chemistry was instantaneous and explosive.
Ava was everything Nancy wasn't.
Everything. The sources note her dual nature. She carried herself with a kind of royalty, yet harbored profound feelings of worthlessness and self-destructive tendencies. It was a mirror image of Frank's own internal contradictions.
And the comparison to Dolly is unavoidable, which is key to the psychology here.
Absolutely. Ava was powerful, she drank, and she swore like a sailor. Dolly absolutely loved Ava.
She did.
Oh, she found Ava's passion far more appealing than the quiet dignity of Nancy, toward whom she had developed outright enmity.
There's an anecdote about Dolly's approval, isn't there?
A famous one. Upon meeting Ava, Dolly pinched Frank's cheek and congratulated him on the great fucking girl he'd landed.
It shows that Frank was, perhaps subconsciously, drawn to a woman who possessed his mother's unpredictable power.
Someone who could scare him and control him just enough to make him feel like he was finally in the presence of an equal force.
But let's address the elephant in the room that ties back to his physical insecurity, the Macrophilus legend.
Right. The sources confirm the intensity of the public and private rumors about Big Frankie having a disproportionately large endowment.
The legendary quote, attributed to Ava Gardner, speaking to Artie Shaw, was, "There's only 10 pounds of Frank, but there's 110 pounds of cock."
It cemented this public image of Frank as a sexual titan, a conqueror fueled by sheer male aggression.
However, the sources provide a powerful counterpoint that digs deep into his vulnerability.
They do. Ava later confessed to Shaw that the reality of sex with Frank was like being in bed with a woman. She described him as too gentle, afraid she would break.
Reinforcing the idea that behind all the public arrogance, the physical legend, and the boastful womanizing, lay a man profoundly anxious about his own body and deeply fearful of true physical intimacy.
His life was a constant battle against his physical self. His height, his flat behind, his receding hairline, and, most centrally, those scars. The macrophallus legend became a necessary psychological armor.
A public assertion of dominance to compensate for the deep ambivalence he felt about his own body.
Exactly.
If the women provided the emotional turbulence, his career was constantly shadowed by darker associations. We have to turn to his connections with the underworld.
Which, for a nightclub performer of his era, were almost unavoidable, given that the mob often backed or secretly owned the venues.
Key figures were his immediate neighbor, Willie Moretti, a powerful mobster in the New Jersey area, and casual encounters with figures like the Fischetti brothers.
And the FBI wasn't interested in rumors, they were interested in hard facts.
Their interest reached a peak in 1947 due to the famous trip to Havana,
Where Sinatra was photographed with Lucky Luciano, who was running an international narcotics cartel in exile at the time. The FBI files contain pictures showing Sinatra with Luciano on a balcony and sitting at a nightclub with bottles, in clear, close company.
So when the Kefauver investigation began, the U.S. Senate's famous televised hearings on organized crime, Sinatra was forced to testify.
And he provided what the sources call highly disingenuous testimony.
He claimed he met the Fischetti brothers casually after Joe took him for a ride on his speedboat. As for Luciano, he claimed he only ran into him at the airport and swore he had absolutely no idea about the nature of their business.
When directly asked about rumors that he carried over $100,000 in cash to Cuba for Luciano, he categorically denied it, saying, "That is not true."
And when the lawyers pressed him about his attraction to underworld characters,
His famous voice, the instrument of his power, actually wavered. He said, "I don't have any attraction for them," then panicked and quickly asked the lawyer, "No, you're not going to put me on television and ruin me just because I know a lot of people, are you?"
he was playing the innocent victim, terrified of the government power structure.
Yet his proximity to figures like Moretti, combined with the vitriolic columns being published by right-wing journalists like Westbrook Pegler and Lee Mortimer, who relentlessly attacked him as a communist and a Jew lover, kept his reputation constantly under siege.
And that's the perfect place to pause for balance, because that Jew lover epithet points to his genuine humanitarian side.
A side George Evans called golden. He truly hated intolerance, partly because it had smacked him personally, having been called a dirty guinea in his youth, and because it attacked people he genuinely loved, like his Jewish neighbors and friends such as manager Manny Sachs.
His commitment wasn't just rhetorical, it was physical and active.
He had dozens of medals manufactured featuring both the Christian Cross of St. Christopher and the Star of David, a highly symbolic and daring gesture in that era of entrenched social division.
Evans leveraged this genuine commitment, sending him out to high schools experiencing acute racial tension.
A crucial example is Benjamin Franklin High School in East Harlem, where one student, the future jazz legend Sonny Rollins, recalled that after Sinatra sang and spoke passionately about tolerance, things got better and the rioting stopped. His presence, his voice, had a tangible calming effect.
What's fascinating and deeply reflective of the era is that this anti-intolerance work actually caught the FBI's attention and fueled their paranoia.
Oh, yes. During the McCarthy era, any public stance against segregation or hatred could be easily weaponized. The FBI received a confidential informant report identifying Frank Sinatra, a well-known radio and movie star, as a member of the Communist Party.
Purely based on his public advocacy for racial equality.
The irony is stark. He was simultaneously terrified of being ruined by government scrutiny due to his mob connections, yet proactively committed acts of public good that made him a political target during a period of intense paranoia.
This inherent instability, the paranoia, the volatility, the drinking, was about to collide with his career, leading to his professional collapse.
Let's talk about the nadir. The period between 1948 and 1953 saw a complete professional and emotional freefall. For a man whose entire identity was built on external validation, this was an existential crisis.
His record sales? They just plummeted.
He hit a bad first when his new album, Frankly Sentimental, failed entirely to chart. This was Frank Sinatra, the biggest singer in the world just a few years earlier, now unable to generate enough interest to make a sales list.
He became desperate. He was forced to chase novelty songs just to get radio play.
The sources specifically cite the humiliating necessity of recording Mama Will Bark, a duet with Dagmar featuring childish growls and barks. This record became shorthand for the downfall of Sinatra's career.
He even joked to his daughter that the only good business it did was with dogs.
The emotional and physical strain, the drinking, the late nights, the constant turbulence with Ava Gardner took a horrifying toll on his instrument. Mitch Miller, the producer, noted that Sinatra's voice was very fragile during this period.
He would come into recording sessions that just couldn't do it.
He couldn't get through a number without his voice cracking under the pressure.
That instability culminated in the worst possible public voice failure at the Copacabana.
The absolute nightmare scenario. He was ill, fatigued, and emotionally exhausted. During one show, the band concluded its introduction, the spotlight hit him, and he opened his mouth to sing.
And nothing.
Nothing came out, not a sound.
It was tragic and terrifying for both him and the audience. The silence was deafening. He was forced to race off stage, leaving the audience stunned.
The voice, the one single thing that had lifted him out of Hoboken, that had justified his existence, had physically betrayed him.
His personal life mirrored this total collapse. Nancy finally filed for divorce in February 1951, stating their life was unhappy and almost unbearable.
He was adrift, and the source material details his desperate attempt at suicide, which his friend and aide, Hank Sanicola, attempted to cover up by calling a doctor and frantically claiming he had the bellyache.
The press, however, quickly got the story. Sinatra denied the attempt, maintaining the fiction that I just had a bellyache. But the desperation was real.
It was. MCA, his agents, had essentially cut him loose. He was reduced to playing small regional gigs, touring the provinces, going from massive theaters to places where the acoustics were terrible.
This descent culminated in the ultimate humiliation. A performance at a county fair in a tent in Hawaii.
The sources paint a vivid picture of the fallen idol, sitting on the stage edge, dangling his legs, singing standards to a small, unimpressed crowd of red-faced tourists and hicks in aloha shirts and jeans and moomis.
Irving Lazar, the powerful agent who would later become his great friend, refused to even take his calls.
Famously saying, he's a dead man. Even Jesus couldn't get resurrected in this town.
And Hollywood was equally unforgiving. MGM had dumped him. His only flicker of hope was a straight dramatic part in the upcoming adaptation of James Jones's World War II novel, From Here to Eternity.
He desperately, almost pathetically, fought for the role of Angela Maggio, the tragic, doomed private.
The resistance was immense, led by Harry Cohn, the chief of Columbia Pictures.
Cohn was ruthless and pragmatic. He initially refused, calling it an actor's part, not a crooner's. He saw Sinatra as a financial, temperamental, declining, and potentially unstable.
But this is where the volatility of his personal life actually saved his professional one.
Ava Gardner stepped in as his fierce, turbulent champion. Although their marriage was collapsing, Ava was filming Showboat at MGM and held significant leverage. She walked into Cohn's office, who was instantly mesmerized by her beauty and power.
And she made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
She made the ultimatum that saved his life and career, telling Cohn, "I'll give you a free picture if you'll just test him."
Wow.
She was willing to use her rising star power as a bargaining chip to prop up her husband's sinking ship. This was the ultimate validation of his need for powerful women in his life, a Dolly-like figure who would ruthlessly fight for him.
Sinatra understood the stakes. He knew this was his last best chance.
And when he got the role, he was a model of cooperation on set. Director Fred Zinnemann noted Frank was very, very good all the time. No histrionics, no bad behavior. He traded his prima donna reputation for a desperate, humble work ethic.
And he transformed himself artistically. He drew on his deep personal vulnerability to inhabit Maggio.
Crucially, he studied his co-star, Montgomery Clift, recognizing the intense subtlety required for film acting. Sinatra adopted Clift's hunched posture, using his own naturally frail physique to convey Maggio's tragic, doomed gaiety.
He blended his innate toughness, born of Hoboken, with his profound personal wounds, creating an entirely original magnetic screen persona.
Simultaneously, his professional fortunes began to turn back in the recording studio. He signed with Capitol Records, but the label head, Alan Livingston, had to gently transition him away from his longtime arranger, Axel Stordahl.
Livingston was introducing him to a relatively unknown trombonist and composer named Nelson Riddle.
And Riddle was nervous during their first session. The sources say he tried too hard, delivering dense, overly complicated arrangements that didn't suit Frank's new artistic direction.
But Sinatra, now a confident craftsman, didn't throw a fit.
No. Instead, he calmly gave Riddle notes and a crucial second chance, scheduling a rare Saturday session with a full orchestra.
That second session was the true birth of the new Sinatra sound.
What Nelson Riddle did was revolutionary. It contrasted sharply with Stortle's lush, string-heavy approach. Riddle left space. He used the rhythm section with surgical precision, emphasizing the brass and giving Sinatra's voice room to breathe and swing rather than burying it under heavy orchestration.
An approach that was tailor-made for Sinatra's newly confident yet still vulnerable voice.
As he listened to the playback of that first major hit from the new partnership, the gloriously exuberant "I've got the world on a string," he knew something very new and very big was up.
It was a complete artistic awakening, even though the record was mistakenly attributed to Billy May and his orchestra due to a labeling error.
The momentum was unstoppable. By the time From Here to Eternity premiered in August 1953, the whispers of his talent were already circulating. Ari Cohn, wisely, opened the film without a big premiere, only placing one full-page ad.
But the public smelled a victory.
Marlene Dietrich called director Fred Zinnemann stunned, reporting that the Capitol Theater was bulging, people were standing around the block, and the demand was so high they had to schedule an extra performance at 1 in the morning. She said, "They smell it. They smell the success."
And the movie became a smashing success, breaking box office records, earning him the Academy Award, and resurrecting him into a higher tier of stardom than he had ever known.
Sinatra was suddenly receiving congratulations and offers that dwarfed the minimal salary he had received for eternity. Hollywood, which had pronounced him dead, now rejoiced in calling his resurrection the greatest career comeback ever.
He was the fiend.
The internal confidence was now bolstered by external objective validation. The man who had been terrified of his body and his instability could now mock his marital woes on stage, joking that he got a kick out of you by miming being booted in the butt.
His career, the source material notes, truly seems more important to him than any woman or family connection.
It did.
So what does this all mean? The ultimate takeaway from this deep dive is that the immense success and enduring mythology of Frank Sinatra were intrinsically tied to the contradictions established in his volatile youth.
Yes. The volatile temperament and the drive came straight from Dolly's brutal love. The unparalleled swagger was a necessary mask for the deep physical insecurities stemming from the birth trauma and those Scarface taunts.
He mastered duality.
His genius lay in his ability to communicate romantic yearning with hints of lust, but always underpinned by an undercurrent of arrogance with a quaver of vulnerability. That was his secret handshake with the audience.
His craft was forged not simply by talent, but by necessity.
An obsessive, lifelong need to prove his worthiness to a world that had initially whipped him out and tossed him aside.
The trauma was the engine. This spectacular, record-breaking success of From Here to Eternity and his subsequent artistic reinvention at Capitol confirmed his ability to endure and transform. It was the ultimate public statement against the quiet failure he feared most.
So, given the trauma of his birth, the physical scars, and the constant fear of career collapse, we have to leave you with one final provocative thought. Was Frank Sinatra's relentless, lifelong pursuit of external validation through fame, through women, and through power a subconscious, unending attempt to prove that he was not the damaged child who was rejected at birth?
Was his entire dazzling career just a desperate effort to pay back an emotional debt he felt he owed, purely for the right to exist? That's the question that remains, even decades after his final bow.